Namaste, many blessings. I wanted to share with you today our journey into the new moon in Gemini. This is Verdeluz with Divine Timing Coaching, and so excited to share about our new moon. It's an exciting time. It's a very fast and accelerated and quite intense time for us. So I want to break down the major cycles of Monday's new moon in Gemini. Here is the chart. For 7:30 a.m. in New York or in the East Coast. And we have this new moon landing in the sign of Gemini. So let's just begin with that and what that signifies. It's not a heavily aspected moon per se, but the other cycles that are going on are really important during this time. The new moon in Gemini is always a really brilliant time for us to set intentions around how we want to learn and educate ourselves. It's also about educating the next generation. And this is a topic I'm speaking about this week, actually, in an evolutionary parenting and revolutionary education talk, all about using astrology and human design to help educate our next generation. And it feels like that pathway is really accelerating for us right now, where we have so many of these beautiful archetypal tools to assist us. And we would imagine that during this new moon in Gemini that our minds are really activated. Sometimes, as you know, Gemini can be, its curiosity leads to distractedness and scatteredness. And so we have to watch with that we don't throw ourselves in too many directions at once right now, especially given our other transit of the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Aries, which we'll talk about more in a moment. Gemini is intellectual. And it's really a question of what we do want to learn about right now and how we want to synthesize the information that we're learning. With the moon in Gemini, that means that Mercury is the ruler of this moon. And Mercury is retrograde. And Mercury has been retrograde for a few weeks now, since about the 10th of May. And Mercury will end his journey in the retrograde by the 4th of June, maybe the 3rd, depending on your time zone. But we still have this, this final week here, and Mercury is in a more pretty intense position. And I want to break this down for you because when we look at Mercury, he's at the 26th degree of Taurus on this full moon. Now, new moon. And this is a square to Saturn right here in Aquarius. And it's also activating the degree within 1 degree of the eclipse that we just had in Scorpio, the lunar eclipse. So what we're looking at here is a very, first of all, important reflection on what's been moving in terms of the last few weeks. Since this eclipse, who have we been constellated around? Probably some very, very powerful soul contracts in our life, especially given the nature of Scorpio and the power of sharing and blending our resources together. That's something that's really come up strong in the last few weeks, as well as some of the themes around sensuality and sexuality, the Taurus-Scorpio axis, and how we are fully embodying our Dharma here. There's been evolution in terms of how we bring the power of the raw energy of Scorpio into the body Taurus. And also like a reconnection with the earth and how we want to be with the earth and with the resources of the earth. So Mercury is aspecting that point of the eclipse. So whatever was happening at the eclipse, whatever is unfolding for you at this time with the eclipse recently, and we want to think that probably it's something that could affect you for the next 6 months or the next year, especially if that eclipse was hitting one of your own planets. So Mercury is bringing all that up for us right now. And it is a very important reflection time for us. Now, the intensity around this Mercury is the Saturnian type of intensity, which is like a more serious or sober way of communicating. We might feel a little bit of heaviness. Saturn brings that. Now, Saturn can help us bring structure and more calculated approach to our thoughts. Mercury's in Taurus, which is a more slow and methodical sign in terms of its intellectual process, And it does like to speak through the body and through the senses, smells and tastes, the foods that we're making, getting out. Like in this weekend, it's Memorial Day weekend in the U.S., and a lot of people will be, grilling foods and being outside in nature in some ways, or hiking or things like that. And that's a beautiful Mercury and Taurus expression. But there is some kind of um, cloud. It's actually just raining here in Colorado right now. But there is some kind of potential cloud with Saturn, and it's a heavy cloud that can say, we need to really mean what we say and say what we mean, and get more real with our communication. And so this is a long time that Mercury and Saturn are squaring each other. And if we look at the charts, we go back a few days. That's May 9th. We're in the weeks here, so let's go to the days. If we go over here, we're at where's Mercury? Yeah, Mercury's right here at 27, so that's a pretty tight square. And this is a few days ago on the 28th. So we're looking at really, since about the 26th here, all the way into when Mercury goes direct. You see that there, that he stations on the 3rd, actually, New York. And he's not going to go away from that square with Saturn anytime soon. You can see this movement here that Mercury will pretty much stay in, at least a 3-degree square. Let's just call it, until he gets into Gemini, which will be on June 14th, his home sign. It'll be a strong time for him at that moment. But if you think, really over the next 2 weeks and really a 3-week time period that we've had Mercury in a square to Saturn, what is that bringing up for us in terms of our communication? And in a way, Saturn kind of checks us and asks us to be more real with what we're saying. And what is that looking like for you, especially with this new moon in Mercury's sign? It's a good time to write. It could be a good time for a more business-like approach to our communications, and actually getting our minds wrapped more around our business. Working on our websites, for instance, putting that mental focus and discipline and concentration that Mercury square Saturn can actually really assist us with. So that would be the most positive way of working with this. But be careful to not be too kind of cold or distant or like authoritarian with your communication. And what adds a flavor of kind of more explosiveness and possible irritability with this, right? It's already Mercury retrograde, and there can be some communication breakdowns. Let's go back to where we are with this moon. There could be some tech challenges. I literally checked my website this morning and found out that it was down because of malware. So I had to take a bunch of extra time and work on that. And, taking the stoic approach of being in integrity and character, building our character through the adversity, right? And not getting overreactive. But actually, doing what needs to be done, Mercury, Saturn, in a very practical, pragmatic way, and taking on the responsibility, especially around our communication. That is really strong with this. Now, this weekend, and actually all of last week, if we go back to the 23rd, we could say over even the next few days until maybe around the 2nd or 3rd, we have a pretty strong conjunction of Mars and Jupiter. And that is, so you've been feeling that amp up all this last week. And the Mars-Jupiter conjunction is in the sign of Aries, where Jupiter has just moved. And what makes this so important is that, we have the philosopher and the guru, the teacher, Jupiter, moving into a very action-oriented sign of Aries for a lot of the next year and all this summer. Well, that speeds energy up. It makes us want to do. And Aries, acts before it thinks a lot of times. And when you add Mars, who rules Aries, very strong in his own sign here, Jupiter in Mars's sign, right? Jupiter in the sign of the sun's exaltation, you get a lot of this very fiery energy. And so this can fire you up in a good way. It can get you very motivated, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction, driven towards that which you're very passionate about. And if we look at you know, the idea of being inspired with Jupiter, the inspiration is towards implementation, action, um, you know, also the expression of our wildness, our primalness with Aries, our animal nature. Um, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So this combination can also be very entrepreneurial, very pioneering. And so there may be ideas, information, could be workshops, it could be a new business plan, it could be a new community you want to connect with. That feels like this is what's emergent, this is what's on the horizon, what's paradigm shifting, right? And there's a lot of sort of new that's channeling through us right now, and it could move very fast. And this could add to some of that, Gemini scatteredness we talked about, that then gets some of this, infusion of the kind of fiery. I just got to do more with Mars Jupiter. This is also, unfortunately, an expression of what's happened recently with a school shooting in the U.S., very violent, and Mars is unfortunately in a very aggressive planet on its own, and then amplified, expanded by Jupiter, and in a sign of Aries that can be quite warlike or violent at times, and it's interesting to look back at some of these cycles with Jupiter and Aries, where we had, for instance, Columbine in Colorado in 1999, one of the first really intense shootings that took place over the last couple decades, and then we had some of the beginnings of the Sandy Hook shootings and the plottings around that around the same time, and there's something in the nature of a violent streak that can be with us with Jupiter and Aries, but definitely when Mars is there, bringing an intense ignition of fire. For all of us, this is really, really challenging to be with the loss of children and anyone. But we want to take this on a personal level and say, what can we get really motivated behind right now, and be careful to not go into the shadows of impatience and irritability and high levels of aggression or competitiveness, instead, get competitive, go out and be athletic, right? Go to the gym, start that practice that you've always wanted to do to get more physically fit. Whatever it is that gets the literal aerobic energy going, and that really cardio kind of stuff. It could be very Mars Jupiter, and just realize that this is also something where Jupiter as the philosopher could mean that Mars could make us very defensive or aggressive about our viewpoint, about our ethics, and it's an important time to be considering these things. What does feel right or not to us? What does feel just or not to us? And but the volume goes up with this transit in a lot of spheres, especially when it comes to politics, religion, philosophy, our belief systems, and faith. And so are we trying to manipulate or push our perspectives on others, or are we getting inspired to go for what we want and to be passionately involved in something that is truly expansive and new and pioneering? So being careful with too much impulsiveness with this cycle and giving yourself enough downtime. And really important with Venus and Taurus as well. The goddess has just moved into her home sign. And so Mercury is there, Venus is there. She'll be there for the next month. And the great thing with that is that can help us slow down and get more into our sensuality, especially in partnerships, and to be, again, appreciating dance, music, nature, and just a slower connection with each other. Venus rules Taurus, Mars rules Aries. So the masculine and feminine, the divine nature within each of us, is in a very strong position right now. And so it could be a beautiful time to do a lot more sacred sexuality work. You know, Aries is known as a very kind of sexual sign, and loves spontaneity, loves play that way. And Taurus is all about sensuality. So these signs can work very well together in terms of bringing a more juicy bond between us and our partners and our beloveds. So yes, I'll be offering a class that will also be recorded. I will put in the link as well, which is all about Tantric astrology and the work of evolving intimacy with learning about our versions of the god and goddess, Mars and Venus, in our charts. And it's a beautiful time, again, to dive deep into this and to play with it, to explore it. So leadership is big right now with this new moon, education, learning, really saying what we mean, being more attentive to details, letting our minds be getting more structured, um, bringing more systems, approaches to what we're doing, and creating more kind of enduring ways of communicating with each other that feel solid and reliable and stable. Lots happening with this new moon, and I wish you the best with this, and until our next session together, namaste, many blessings, happy new moon in Gemini.